Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. Today we would like to introduce to you a concept in international trade known as non-tariff barriers or NTBs. When countries trade with one another, they often try to control the flow of goods across their borders. One common method is through tariffs, which are taxes imposed on imported goods. However, in today's global economy, many countries rely more on non-tariff barriers rather than tariffs. Non-tariff barriers refers to all restrictions on trade that are not in the form of taxes imported instead of increasing prices directly. These barriers use rules, regulations, or procedures that can limit or control imported and exports. Non-tariff barriers exist for several important reasons. Governments use them to protect local industries, ensure product safety, and maintain health and environmental standards. For example, imported food products may be required to meet certain safety or quality requirements before they can be sold in a country. There are many forms of non-tariff barriers. Some common examples include important quotas, which limit the amount of goods that can be brought into the country, and lessening requirements where importers must obtain approval before trading certain products. Other examples include product standards, labeling rules, and health regulations. Although non-tariff barriers can be useful, they can also affect international trades. They may increase the cost of doing business, slow down the trading process, and make it harder for some countries, especially developing nations, to enter foreign markets. In conclusion, non-tariff barriers play a significant role in modern international trade. They are not always visible like tariffs, but they strongly influence how goods move across borders. Understanding non-tariff barriers helps us better understand how governments manage trade while balancing economic growth and public interest.
Non-tariff barriers are trade restrictions that do not involve taxes, but instead use rules, limits, and regulations to control import and export. First, import quotas limit the quantity of the goods that can be imported, which protects local industries but raises prices. Next, voluntary export restraints occur when exporting countries voluntarily limit their export to avoid stricter restrictions. Domestic content requirements require a certain percentage of products to be made locally to support domestic production. Export subsidies are government payments that help domestic firms sell goods more cheaply in foreign market. Technical and administrative regulation include safety standards, licensing, labeling, and complex procedures that can indirectly restrict imports. Anti-dumping duties are extra charges imposed on goods sold below fair value to protect domestic industry. Finally, international cartels are agreements among producers from different countries to control supply and maintain high price. Together, this non-tariff barrier shape global trade by protecting domestic markets while limiting foreign competition.
Argument for using non-tariff barriers. One reason governments use non-tariff barriers is to protect domestic industries and jobs. For example, infant industries that are still new may need temporary protection so they can grow and become competitive in the global market. Another reason is to safeguard national security and strategic sectors, such as food supply, defense, and essential industries. Relying too much on foreign suppliers can be risky, especially during crisis. Non-tariff barriers are also used for consumer protection and environmental standards. Governments set rules to ensure imported goods are safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly, which helps protect consumers and the environment. Lastly, non-tariff barriers can be used to correct unfair trade practices such as dumping or foreign subsidies through anti-dumping measures and investigation that are allowed under World Trade Organization rules. Argument against using non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers also have several disadvantages. First, they can lead to higher prices and fewer choices for consumers, as reduced foreign competitions allows domestic firms to raise prices. Second, non-tariff barriers may cause market inefficiencies by allowing less efficient firms to survive and misallocating resources away from sectors where a country has a comparative advantage. Third, reduced competition can slow innovation and productivity growth over time. Non-tariff barriers can also lead to retaliation and trade tension, where other countries respond with their own trade barriers, potentially escalating into trade wars. And finally, non-tariff barriers can distort global trade and reduce overall global welfare, especially harming developing countries that depend on access to international markets. Role of the World Trade Organization in non-tariff barriers. The World Trade Organization plays an important role in regulating non-tariff barriers. The World Trade Organization does not ban non-tariff barriers completely, but it ensures they are used fairly and transparently. Through agreements such as the Technical Barriers to Trade (TBT) and Sanitary and Phytosanitary (SPS) agreement, the World Trade Organization requires that non-tariff barriers are non-discriminatory, are based on scientific evidence, and are not more trade restrictive than necessary. The World Trade Organization also provides a dispute settlement system to resolve conflicts related to non-tariff barriers and helps prevent trade disputes from turning into trade wars.
Hello everyone, in this video I will explain two real case studies of non-tariff barriers or NTBs in international trade. Even when countries reduce or remove tariffs through free trade agreements, trade can still be restricted by non-tariff barriers such as regulations, standards, and administrative procedures. The two case studies I will discuss are, first, India's export to Asia and Sri Lanka, and second, non-tariff barriers in pharmaceutical sector in Indonesia. Non-tariff barriers are trade restrictions that do not involve taxes or tariffs. Examples include technical standards, health and safety regulations, import licensing, and lengthy approval process. Although these measures are often introduced for safety and quality control, they can also limit trade and increases costs for exporters. The first case study focuses on India's trade with Asian countries and Sri Lanka. India has signed free trade agreements with these countries which significantly reduce tariffs. However, Indian exporters still face major challenge due to non-tariff barriers. One major issue is technical standards and certification requirements. Products that already meet Indian standards often must be retested or recertified and to enter Asian markets. Another barrier is sanitary and phytosanitary measures, especially for food and agriculture products. This includes strict health and hygiene rules, unclear procedures, and inconsistent enforcement. In addition, exporters face complex documentation and import licensing procedures which cause delays and increased costs. As a result, even though tariffs are low or zero, Indian exports remain less competitive, especially for small and medium-sized firms. This case study shows that tariff reduction alone is not enough to increase trade. The second case study focuses on the pharmaceutical sector in Indonesia. Indonesia applies strict regulation on imported medicines to protect public health and support domestic industries. However, many of these regulations act as non-tariff barriers. One key barrier is the lengthy drug approval and registration process. Foreign pharmaceutical companies must submit extensive documentations and local clinical data. This process can take several years and delaying market entry. Another barrier is the preference for locally produced medicines. Foreign firms are often encouraged to manufacture locally or partner with domestic companies. These requirements increase costs for foreign firms and reduce competition in the market. As a result, patients may face higher prices and slower access to new or innovative medicines. In conclusion, both case studies show that non-tariff barriers can act as invisible barriers to trade. Even without tariffs, strict regulation, complex procedures, and technical standards can increase costs, delay market access, reduce competition. Therefore, addressing non-tariff barriers is essential for fairer and more efficient international trade.
To conclude, non-tariff barriers play a crucial role in shaping international trade in today's global economy. While tariffs were once the main tool used by governments to control imports and exports, non-tariff barriers have become increasingly significant and influential. Throughout this discussion, we have seen that non-tariff barriers are trade restrictions that do not involve taxes but instead operate through regulations, standard quotas, and administrative procedures. Although they are less visible than tariffs, their impact on trade can be just as strong or even stronger. Non-tariff barriers serve several important and legitimate purposes. They help governments protect public health and safety, ensures that products meet required quality and environmental standards, and safeguard domestic industries from unfair competition. Measures such as food safety regulation, product certification, and imported licensing are often necessary to protect consumers and national interests. However, it is important to recognize that non-tariff barriers can create challenges when these barriers are overly strict, poorly designed, or applied unfairly. They can increase trade costs, slow down the movement of goods, and limit market access. This can reduce consumers' choice and create difficulties for exporters, particularly those from developing countries. In the global trading system, non-tariff barriers present a delicate balance. On one hand, they are essential for maintaining standards and protecting society. On the other hand, they can be misused as hidden forms of protectionism that restricts fair trade. Therefore, transparency, cooperation, and international agreements are crucial in ensuring that non-tariff barriers are applied appropriately. Organizations such as the World Trade Organization play an important role in monitoring and regulating the use of non-tariff barriers, encouraging countries to align their regulations and resolve trade disputes, though throughout the dialogue. In conclusion, non-tariff barriers are unavoidable and powerful features of modern international trade. Understanding their purpose, types, and impacts allows us to better appreciate the complexity of global trade relations. Rather than viewing non-tariff barriers as a purely negative or purely positive, they should be seen as tools that must be carefully managed. A balanced and fair use of non-tariff barriers can support economic growth, protect consumers, and promote sustainability development, while excessive use can hinder trade and cooperation between nations. That's all from us. Thank you.